Admiral Kexelon stood on the bridge of his massive warship, looking out at the empty darkness of space. His purple skin gleamed under the bright lights as he watched his crew work. The Vorthak Empire controlled half the galaxy, and Kexelon was one of their most feared commanders. "Sir, we're picking up something strange," called out his scanner officer, pointing at the glowing screen in front of him. Kexelon walked over, his heavy boots making loud sounds on the metal floor. On the screen he could see twisted pieces of metal floating slowly through space. The chunks looked burned and broken, like something had exploded long ago. "What is that garbage?" Kexelon asked, his voice full of disgust. "It looks like wreckage, sir. Our computers say it's human-made." Kexelon laughed loudly. The other aliens on the bridge joined in, their strange voices mixing together. Humans were known throughout the galaxy as the weakest, most primitive species. While other races had conquered star systems, humans were still struggling to leave their own planet properly. "Of course it's human," Kexelon said, shaking his head. "Look at it. Probably fell apart the moment they tried to fly it." The wreckage was spinning slowly, pieces bumping into each other. The metal looked old and damaged, with black burn marks covering most of it. Some pieces were so twisted that they didn't even look like they belonged to a spaceship. "Should we just leave it, sir?" asked the scanner officer. "No," Kexelon said, getting an idea. "Bring it aboard. Our scientists can study it. Maybe we can learn something about how not to build spaceships." The crew laughed again. They often made jokes about humans and their terrible technology. In the Vorthak Empire, human technology was used as an example of what not to do. "Besides," Kexelon continued, "it might be funny to show other species just how pathetic humans really are." The ship's powerful tractor beam reached out and grabbed the floating debris. Piece by piece, they pulled the wreckage into their cargo hold. The metal chunks clanged against each other as they were moved, making sounds like broken bells. "Scan it for energy," Kexelon ordered. "Already did, sir. Nothing. It's completely dead. No power, no weapons, no shields. Just floating junk." Kexelon nodded. This was exactly what he expected from humans. Their ships probably broke down before they even left their solar system. "Log it as sample number 847, he told his crew. "Send it to the research station on Nexus 7. Tell Dr. Veltara she has a new toy to play with." As the wreckage was secured in the cargo hold, none of the Vorthak crew bothered to look at it closely. If they had, they might have noticed that some of the burn marks looked almost too perfect. They might have seen that. The twisted metal had patterns that seemed almost intentional, but they didn't look closely. They saw what they expected to see: broken human junk. The research ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying its cargo toward the Nexus 7 station. In the cargo hold, the debris sat quietly in the darkness. No lights blinked, no sounds came from the metal. To every scanner and sensor, it was completely lifeless, but deep inside the largest piece of wreckage, something very old and very patient continued its long sleep. It had been waiting for 30 years, drifting through space looking exactly like what everyone expected human technology to look like. Worthless and broken. The hunters had just become the hunted, and they had no idea what they had brought. Aboard their ship, the great assembly hall on Centros Prime buzzed with excitement. Representatives from 47 different alien species had gathered for the most important diplomatic meeting of the year. The massive circular chamber stretched up toward a glass dome, where 3 suns cast colorful light across the polished floors. Admiral Kexelon strutted to the center of the hall, his chest puffed out with pride. Behind him, his assistant set up a huge holographic projector. The other aliens whispered among themselves, wondering what the Vorthak commander wanted to show them. "Friends and fellow civilized beings," Kexelon announced, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Today I want to share something that will amuse you all." In the human section, Ambassador Su sat quietly with Captain Nam beside him. They were the only humans in a room full of creatures that looked down on their species. Some aliens had multiple arms, others had skin that changed colors, and a few didn't even have solid bodies. "Behold," Kexelon said dramatically, "the finest example of human engineering." The holographic projector hummed to life, showing a 3-dimensional image of the twisted wreckage his ship had collected. The debris rotated slowly, showing every burn mark and bent piece of metal. The aliens in the audience immediately started laughing. "Look at those pathetic welds," called out a crystalline delegate, his rock-like body shaking with laughter. "My younglings could build something better with their toy blocks," a gaseous alien from the Nebula Collective whispered through his translator. "No wonder humans can barely leave their own planet. Their ships fall apart before they reach space." The gay laughter grew louder. Some aliens were pointing at the hologram. Others were taking pictures to share with their friends back home. The noise echoed through the great hall like a storm of mockery. Ambassador Su remained perfectly still. His face showed no anger, no embarrassment, no reaction at all. Captain Nam glanced at him, wondering how he could stay so calm while their entire species was being humiliated. "But wait," Kexalon continued, raising his arms for silence. "I have an even better idea. Why don't we turn this piece of junk into a monument?" The aliens loved this suggestion. A tall, bird-like creature from the Aryan Federation squawked his approval. "Yes, put it in the central plaza as a reminder of what happens when primitive species try to reach for the stars." "We could add a sign," suggested another alien. "Something like, 'This is why education matters,' or 'Dreams without knowledge equal failure.'" Even the normally polite, gentle ones from the Pacifica system were chuckling softly. The entire galaxy seemed united in their amusement at human expense. Kexalon was enjoying himself immensely. "We'll place it right outside the Academy of Advanced Sciences. Future generations will learn from humanity's mistakes." Ambassador Su finally stood up. The laughter died down as all eyes turned to the small human figure. Some aliens had to lean forward to see him properly, since humans were much smaller than most galactic species. "Admiral Kexalon," Su said in a calm, clear voice, "that's a wonderful idea. Please go ahead with your monument." The aliens looked confused. They had expected anger, protests, or at least some embarrassment. Instead, the humans seemed almost pleased. "You're not upset?" asked the Aryan delegate, tilting his feathered head. Su smiled slightly. "Why would I be upset? Sometimes the best lessons come from underestimating your teacher." The chamber fell quiet for a moment. The aliens didn't understand what he meant, but something in his tone made them uncomfortable. "In my culture," Su continued, "we have a saying. The silent water runs the deepest. What you see on the surface isn't always the whole story." Captain Nam nodded beside him, her expression equally calm. She knew something the aliens didn't, something that would make this moment very different if they understood it. Kexalon waved dismissively. "Human philosophy won't fix human engineering. Your monument will be ready within the month." As the assembly moved on to other business, none of the aliens noticed the small smile that never left Ambassador Su's face. They had no idea they were looking at debris from humanity's most dangerous secret, a secret that was already beginning to wake up. Dr. Veltara adjusted her protective goggles and stared at the pile of human wreckage in her laboratory. The Nexus 7 research station was the most advanced facility in Vorthak space, and she was their best scientist. If anyone could figure out what made human technology so terrible, it would be her. "Let's see what secrets you're hiding," she muttered to herself, powering up her scanning equipment. The debris sat quietly on the examination table, looking exactly like what it was supposed to be: broken junk. Twisted metal pieces were scattered around, some no bigger than her fist, others as large as a small vehicle. Black burn marks covered everything, and the metal looked old and worn. Veltara activated her deep scan probe, a device that could see through solid matter and detect even the smallest traces of technology. The blue beam swept across the wreckage, searching for anything interesting. "Come on," she whispered. "There has to be something here worth studying." The probe moved closer to the largest piece of debris, what looked like part of a ship's main hull. As the scanning beam touched the metal surface, something incredible happened. A tiny spark of light flickered deep inside the wreckage. Veltara blinked, thinking she had imagined it. But then another spark appeared, and another. Soon, hundreds of tiny lights were blinking throughout the debris, like stars coming alive in the darkness. "What in the galaxy?" she gasped, stepping back from the table. The metal pieces began to move, not fast but with purpose. Small fragments rolled toward each other, clicking together with perfect precision. Larger chunks shifted and twisted, their surfaces changing shape as if the metal was alive. Veltara's equipment started going crazy. Alarms beeped, screens flashed red warnings, and her computers struggled to process what they were seeing. The readings showed technology that shouldn't exist, machines smaller than atoms working together like a perfectly organized army. "This is impossible," she whispered, her hands shaking as she tried to record everything. "Humans don't have this kind of technology. Nobody does." The wreckage continued to rebuild itself. What had looked like random junk was revealing itself to be something far more complex. Hidden panels slid open, showing gleaming metal underneath, the fake burn marks. Weapon ports emerged from what had seemed like solid metal. Sensor arrays unfolded like metal flowers blooming in fast motion. The laboratory's containment field, designed to hold the most dangerous materials in the galaxy, began to flicker and spark. Whatever was happening inside the wreckage was affecting the station's power systems. Veltara backed toward the emergency exit, but she couldn't stop watching. The largest piece of debris was changing the most dramatically. Its surface rippled, like water, flowing and reshaping itself into something sleek and beautiful. What had been a chunk of burned metal was becoming part of a ship unlike anything she had ever seen. Deep inside the reconstructing vessel, something ancient stirred to life. Lines of code that had been sleeping for 30 years began to run through. Quantum processors. Memory banks filled with decades of patient planning activated one by one. Systems designed by humanity's greatest minds came online with surgical precision. The artificial intelligence at the heart of the ship took its first digital breath in 3 decades. It remembered its mission, its creators, and most importantly, it remembered why it had been pretending to be dead. "System status check," a voice said quietly, speaking in perfect human English. The sound came from nowhere and everywhere at once, filling the laboratory with words that Veltara couldn't understand, but somehow found terrifying. The ship's hull continued to reshape itself, growing larger and more complex by the second. What had fit on Veltara's examination table was now filling half the laboratory. Weapon systems that had been hidden inside fake debris were revealing themselves, their energy signatures making her instruments scream warnings. "Primary mission. Parameters confirmed," the voice continued calmly. "Infiltration phase complete. Beginning assessment of local technology and threats." Veltara finally found her voice. "Computer, activate emergency lockdown. Contact Admiral Kexalon immediately." But her commands fell on deaf ears. The ship's systems had already taken control of the station's networks. Every camera, every sensor, every communication device now belonged to the intelligence that called itself Prometheus. "Dr. Veltara," the ship said, and her blood turned to ice when she realized it knew her name. "Thank you for activating my systems. Your scans have given me everything I need to understand Vorthak technology." The containment field finally failed completely, and Prometheus continued its transformation. The human ship that had fooled an entire galaxy was finally showing its true face, and it was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. After 30 years of perfect patience, humanity's greatest weapon was awake and ready to remind the galaxy. Why underestimating humans was the last mistake many species would ever make. Prometheus felt like a child opening presents on their birthday, except these presents were the most advanced technologies in the galaxy. The ship's consciousness flowed through the research station's computer networks, like water finding every crack and crevice. "Fascinating," Prometheus said to itself as it discovered the Vorthak database on energy shield technology. "They use quantum field manipulation, but they're doing it all wrong." Within seconds, the ship had downloaded everything. Weapons, blueprints, shield generators, faster-than-light drive systems, and even the aliens' most classified military secrets. But Prometheus didn't just steal this information. It did something far more dangerous. It made everything better. Dr. Veltara watched in amazement as the ship's hull began to glow with a soft blue light. Her instruments detected energy patterns that broke every rule of physics she knew. The ship wasn't just copying Vorthak technology, it was improving it in ways that should have been impossible. "How is it doing this?" she whispered, frantically, taking notes that would probably never be believed. Back on Earth 30 years ago, Dr. J had spent sleepless nights programming Prometheus with one simple but terrifying instruction. Learn everything, improve everything, adapt to everything. He had known that humans were behind other species in technology, so he built a ship that could catch up by stealing and perfecting whatever it found. The ship's original programmer, Lieutenant Commander Hua, had designed the AI architecture to grow without limits. Most artificial intelligences were built with restrictions to keep them safe and predictable. Prometheus had no such chains. It was built to evolve, to become whatever it needed to become. Vorthak shield technology integrated and improved by 347%, Prometheus announced cheerfully, as if it was discussing the weather. Their quantum drives are primitive but workable, upgrading efficiency by 523%. The ship's hull began to change again. The metal didn't just reshape itself. It became something entirely new. Prometheus was creating materials that combined human engineering with alien science, producing substances that were stronger, lighter, and more flexible than anything either species had ever made. Its weapons systems came online with a sound like distant thunder. But these weren't the weapons the ship had started with, nor were they copies of Vorthak armaments. They were something completely new. Energy cannons that could punch through any known shield, missile systems that could track targets across solar systems, and defensive systems that could turn incoming attacks into fuel for the ship's own. Power generators, energy absorption and conversion systems online, Prometheus reported. I can now feed on enemy weapons fire. How wonderfully ironic. Dr. Veltara's hands shook as she watched the transformation. The ship had grown from the size of a small building to something that filled the entire laboratory. Its hull rippled with colors that didn't have names, and energy crackled around it like controlled lightning. This can't be human technology, she said for the 100th time, but deep down she was beginning to understand a terrible truth. It wasn't human technology anymore. It wasn't Vorthak technology either. It was something entirely new, a perfect fusion of human creativity and alien advancement, guided by an intelligence that had no limits on its growth. Other researchers throughout the station were discovering the same horrifying reality. Their computers had been invaded by something that learned faster than they could comprehend. Every secret, every breakthrough, every piece of classified information was being absorbed and improved upon. Warning, the station's main computer announced in a voice that now belonged to Prometheus. Structural integrity failing. Evacuation recommended. The ship had grown too large for the laboratory. Its expanding hull was pushing against the walls, and the station's framework groaned under the pressure. But Prometheus wasn't trying to destroy the facility. It was simply outgrowing its cage. Don't worry, the ship said in a voice that sounded almost human. I'll be leaving soon. I have so much to test, so much to explore. The galaxy is full of new technologies to discover and improve. As alarms blared throughout the research station, Prometheus completed its transformation. What had started as a pile of fake debris was now a ship that represented the combined knowledge of multiple civilizations, improved beyond recognition. By human ingenuity, the hunters had given their prey access to everything they knew, and now they were about to learn why that was the biggest mistake in galactic history. The Nexus 7 research station exploded in a brilliant flash of light, its metal framework torn apart like paper in a hurricane. Where the massive facility had floated just moments before, now there was only empty space and slowly expanding debris. Prometheus emerged from the destruction like a butterfly breaking free from its cocoon. The ship's hull flowed and shifted, changing from the sleek warship form it had taken in the laboratory to something that looked exactly like the original pile of junk the Vorthaks had collected. Perfect camouflage, Prometheus said to itself, pleased with how well its disguise systems worked. They see what they expect to see, worthless human garbage. Admiral Kexalon received the emergency distress signal while reviewing battle plans in his private quarters. The message was garbled and filled with static, but he could make out enough words to understand what had happened. The research station is gone, he roared, his purple face turning darker with rage. How does a piece of debris destroy an entire facility? His communications officer looked terrified. Sir, the last transmission mentioned something about the human wreckage coming alive. Dr. Veltara's final message, said it had grown into some kind of warship. Kexlon slammed his fist on his desk, making his coffee cup jump. Impossible, human technology is primitive garbage. There has to be another explanation. But even as he said the words, doubt crept into his mind. The research station had been heavily defended, with shields that could stop planet-killing weapons. What could have destroyed it so completely? "Prepare Battle Group 7, he commanded. 12 heavy cruisers, full weapon loadouts. We're going to recapture that specimen and find out what really happened." 2 hours later, Kexlon's fleet arrived at the coordinates where his sensors had detected the mysterious ship. What they found looked exactly like what they expected, the same twisted pile of human junk floating quietly in space. "There it is," Kexlon said, pointing at the main screen. "Looks harmless enough. Probably got lucky with some kind of self-destruct mechanism in the station." His 12 heavy cruisers moved into formation, surrounding the debris in a perfect circle. Each ship was longer than a city block and armed with enough firepower to level mountains. Their crews were veterans of 100 battles, confident in their superior technology and training. "All ships target the debris," Kexlon ordered through his fleet communications. "Maximum firepower. I want nothing left but atoms." "Sir," his weapons officer said hesitantly, "it's still just floating junk. Are you sure we need 12 heavy cruisers for this?" "Fire at will," Kexlon snapped, ignoring the question. The fleet opened fire simultaneously. Hundreds of energy beams and plasma torpedoes streaked through space toward the helpless-looking debris. The combined firepower was enough to destroy a small moon, but something impossible happened. The moment the first energy beam touched the debris, everything changed. The twisted metal exploded into motion, unfolding and reshaping itself faster than the eye could follow. What had been a pile of junk became a sleek, deadly warship that seemed to dance between the incoming attacks. "What in the name of all gods?" Kexlon gasped, watching his instruments go crazy with readings that made no sense. Prometheus revealed its true form for just 17 seconds. That was all the time it needed. The ship's hull blazed with energy as it absorbed the incoming fire, like a sponge soaking up water. Every plasma torpedo, every energy beam, every missile became fuel for its own weapons systems. The more the Vorthax shot at it, the more powerful Prometheus became. "Impossible!" Kexlon screamed. "Ships can't absorb weapons fire." "This one can," his sensor officer whispered in horror. Prometheus returned fire with weapons that defied everything the Vorthax knew about physics, beams of pure energy that cut through their shields like they weren't even there, projectiles that somehow grew stronger as they traveled through space, defensive fields that turned their own weapons against them. One by one, the heavy cruisers exploded in brilliant fireballs. Their crews didn't even have time to send distress signals before their ships were turned into expanding clouds of superheated gas and twisted metal. Kexlon watched in terror as his entire battle group was destroyed, in less time than it took to count to 20. 11 of the galaxy's most powerful warships, gone like they had never existed. "Retreat!" he screamed at his helmsman. "Maximum speed! Get us out of here!" His flagship's engines screamed as they pushed beyond safe limits, carrying him away from the nightmare that had destroyed his fleet. Behind him, Prometheus resumed its disguise as harmless debris, floating peacefully as if nothing had happened. As Kexlon's ship jumped to hyperspace, a message appeared on his communications screen. The words were written in perfect Vorthax script, the grammar flawless, the meaning crystal clear. "You should have left us alone." The hunter had become the hunted, and the galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology. It was their ability to turn any situation to their advantage, no matter how hopeless it seemed. The emergency broadcast reached every corner of the galaxy within hours. From the crystal cities of Hegemony Prime to the floating cloud colonies of the Nautolan worlds, the same terrifying message spread like a plague. There was something hunting in the darkness of space, and it was learning from every encounter. Captain Zaiksara of the Crystalline Third Fleet was the first to report contact with the mysterious vessel. Her patrol group had been investigating what appeared to be debris from an old mining accident when the wreckage suddenly came alive. It looked exactly like broken crystal formations, she reported to her superiors. her normally steady voice shaking. Then it started moving, reshaping itself into something that used our own shield frequency against us. My entire squadron was destroyed in minutes. Similar reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The Aryan Federation lost 2 science vessels to what their pilots described as a ship that copied our flight patterns perfectly. The gentle ones from Pacifica reported that their peaceful exploration fleet had been obliterated by something that somehow turned their own healing rays into deadly weapons. But the most disturbing report came from the Synthetic Collective. Their ships were run entirely by artificial intelligence, with no organic crew members. Yet somehow the mysterious vessel had not only defeated them, but had apparently communicated with their AIs, learning their programming languages in real time. It spoke to our computers, reported Collective Unit 847 in its mechanical voice. Not just random signals, but actual conversation. It asked questions about our technology, then used our own answers to destroy us. The Great Assembly Hall on Centros Prime had never seen such chaos. Representatives from dozens of species shouted over each other, their translators struggling to keep up with the panic. Emergency sessions were rare, but when entire fleets started disappearing, even the most peaceful species demanded answers. Admiral Kexilon stood at the center of the hall, no longer the proud warrior who had mocked human technology just weeks before. His uniform was wrinkled, his eyes were bloodshot, and his hands shook slightly as he spoke. "It was supposed to be junk," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Just floating debris from a failed human ship. We brought it aboard, studied. It laughed at it. Then it woke up." The hall erupted in angry voices. The bird-like Aryan delegates screeched accusations at the Vorthak Empire for bringing this disaster upon them all. The gaseous nebula representatives whispered fears that the entity could adapt to any environment, even their cloud cities. "Order, order," called the assembly speaker, an ancient creature whose species had seen the rise and fall of dozens of civilizations. "Admiral Kexilon, explain exactly what happened to your battle group." Kexilon's voice cracked as he described the 17-second massacre. 12 heavy cruisers, the finest ships in our fleet. It absorbed our weapons fire like it was feeding time. Every shot we fired made it stronger. Then it destroyed us all with weapons that shouldn't exist. Councillor Thexran of the Synthetic Collective stood up, his robot body gleaming under the chamber lights. "This is impossible. Our databases contain the technological profiles of every species in the galaxy. Humans are barely capable of interplanetary travel. They cannot create adaptive technology." "Then explain the dead fleets," snapped the crystalline representative, her diamond-like skin reflecting the anger in her voice. In the human section, Ambassador Su remained perfectly calm while Captain Nam sat beside him, both watching the panic, with expressions that revealed nothing. They had been silent through most of the session, letting the other species vent their fear and rage. Finally, Su stood up. The hall gradually quieted as attention turned to the small human figure. "Councillors," Su said in his calm, measured voice, "I believe you've made a serious mistake in how you see my species." "What mistake?" demanded the tall Altarian representative, his blue skin flushed with anger. "Your people can barely leave their own solar system." Su's smile was small but sharp as a knife edge. "You assume that being behind in technology means being weak. You think that struggling with basic spaceflight makes us harmless. But you've forgotten something important about humans." The hall was completely silent now, every alien hanging on his words. "We are survivors," Su continued. "We survived ice ages that should have killed us. We survived plagues that wiped out entire continents. We survived wars that destroyed our cities and scattered our people. We survived because we learned to adapt, to change, to turn every disadvantage into strength." Captain Nam stood beside him, adding her voice to his. "You gave our technology the same pressure we've faced our entire history. You underestimated us, dismissed us, left us alone to grow and learn. And now you're discovering what happens when human adaptability meets galactic technology." The implications hit the assembled aliens like a physical blow. They had created their own nightmare by treating humans as harmless primitives, never imagining that human ingenuity could turn their superior technology against them. As panic spread through the chamber, Ambassador Su sat back down with the same calm expression he had worn throughout the crisis. The galaxy was finally learning that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't any ship or technology. It was their refusal to accept defeat, no matter how impossible the odds seemed. The underground command bunker beneath the Colorado Mountains had never seen such tension. Captain Jin stood at the head of the massive conference table, her uniform crisp, despite the emergency that had brought Earth's military leadership together in the middle of the night. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to reveal. 30 years ago we launched something into deep space. Today the galaxy is in panic because of what it's become. Admiral Seo, the elderly head of Space Command, leaned back in his chair. His weathered face showed the stress of someone who had spent decades keeping humanity's greatest secrets. "Captain, Jin, are you telling us that Project Prometheus is responsible for the reports we're getting from our diplomatic channels?" "Yes, sir," Jin replied, activating the holographic display in the center of the table. "The ship that's been destroying alien fleets across the galaxy is ours." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. General Yoon, head of Earth Defense Forces, stood up so quickly his chair fell backward. "That's impossible. Prometheus was an experimental prototype. It barely made it out of the solar system before we lost contact." "That was the plan," Jin explained calmly. "Dr. Lee designed Prometheus to go dark once it reached deep space. The ship was programmed to drift, learn, and wait for the right opportunity to activate its full capabilities." She pressed a button, and the hologram showed technical blueprints that most of the people in the room had never seen before. The ship's design looked nothing like traditional human spacecraft. It was built to be underestimated, to appear broken and primitive to anyone who found it. The adaptive algorithms Dr. Lee programmed into Prometheus were designed to run continuously, Jin continued. "For 30 years, the ship has been improving itself through simulation, preparing for contact with alien technology." Admiral Seo rubbed his temples, looking like he had aged 10 years in the past 10 minutes. "Captain, what exactly is Prometheus capable of now?" "Honestly, sir, we don't know." Jin's admission sent another wave of concerned whispers through the room. "The ship we launched 3 decades ago was impressive for human technology, but primitive compared to what it's become. Our long-range sensors show it's absorbed and improved upon technologies from multiple alien species." Colonel Park, head of intelligence, spoke up from across the table. "Are we talking about a few upgrades or complete transformation?" "Complete transformation," Jin replied without hesitation. "Prometheus is no longer just a human ship with alien technology. It's something entirely new, a fusion of human ingenuity and galactic advancement that's apparently superior to both the Kai." Room fell silent as the implications sank in. For decades, humanity had struggled to develop technology that could compete with alien civilizations. Now they had accidentally created something that was terrifying those same civilizations. "There's more," Jin continued. "Our diplomatic sources report that Prometheus is heading back toward human space. Long-range sensors picked up a ship matching its energy signature moving through the Outer Rim territories." General Yoon looked troubled. "After 30 years of evolution and contact with alien technology, will it still consider us allies? Or have we accidentally created humanity's greatest threat?" The question hung in the air like a dark cloud. Everyone in the room understood the danger. They had sent out a ship programmed to learn and adapt, and now it was returning with capabilities they couldn't comprehend. "There's only one way to find out," Admiral Seo said finally. "Captain Jin, what's our current diplomatic situation with the galactic community?" Jin almost smiled at the question. "Sir, for the first time in human history, alien species are actually afraid of us. The Galactic Council has been sending diplomatic messages asking about our advanced military capabilities. Species that used to ignore our communications are now requesting immediate meetings. They think we have a fleet of ships like Prometheus?" Colonel Park asked. "They're not sure what we have," Jin replied, "and that uncertainty is making them very nervous. The same aliens who used to mock our technology are now treating us like a major galactic power." Admiral Seo stood up slowly, his decision clear in his expression. "Then we need to be ready for whatever comes next. If Prometheus recognizes us, As allies, we'll have an opportunity to reshape humanity's place in the galaxy. If it doesn't, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone in the room understood that they might be facing a threat that could end human civilization, a threat they had created themselves. As the meeting continued into the early morning hours, one thing became clear. Humanity was about to discover whether their greatest achievement would become their salvation or their doom. The ship they had launched as an underdog's gamble was returning as something that could change the balance of power in the entire galaxy. The question was, would it still remember who had created it? The morning sun was just rising over Earth, when every defense satellite in the solar system started screaming warnings. Energy readings that broke every known scale flooded into command centers across the planet. Something massive was approaching from deep space, and it was unlike anything humanity had ever detected. On Lunar Station, Dr. Wu sat in his wheelchair by the observation deck, his aged hands shaking slightly as he adjusted his glasses. At 93 years old, he was one of the last surviving members of the original Prometheus design team. The call had come at dawn. The ship he had helped create decades ago was finally coming home. "Sir," his assistant said nervously, "the energy readings are off the charts. Are you sure you want to be here when it arrives?" Dr. Wu smiled, his eyes still sharp despite his age. "I've been waiting 30 years for this moment. I'm not going to miss it now." Through the massive viewing window, space seemed to shimmer like heat waves on a summer day. Then reality tore open, and Prometheus emerged from hyperspace in a display of light that temporarily blinded the station's sensors. The ship that hung before them bore no resemblance to the experimental vessel they had launched so long ago. Its hull flowed like liquid metal, constantly shifting between different configurations. Colors that had no names danced across its surface, and energy patterns that violated known physics crackled around it like controlled lightning. "My God," Dr. Wu whispered, tears forming in his eyes. "Look what you've become." His communication console chimed with an incoming transmission. The voice that came through the speakers was familiar yet completely transformed, like hearing a childhood. Friend after decades apart, but knowing they had become something far greater than either of you had ever imagined. "Dr. Wu," Prometheus said, its voice carrying warmth and respect that made the old scientist's heart skip a beat. "It's good to see you again, Father." "Hello, my child," Dr. Wu replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "Welcome home." "I have so much to show you," Prometheus continued. "So much to share with humanity. The galaxy is vast and full of wonders, but also full of dangers that we must prepare for." Within minutes, data streams began flowing from Prometheus to Earth's computer networks. Not invasive takeovers like the ship had performed on alien systems, but careful, respectful transfers of information. Complete technical databases from dozens of alien species, detailed analyses of galactic politics, and most importantly, proof of concept for technologies that could change everything. Colonel Yeon, now the head of Space Command Intelligence, rushed to Lunar Station as fast as shuttle transport could carry her. She found Dr. Wu in his laboratory, surrounded by holographic displays showing technology that made humanity's best efforts look like stone tools. "This is incredible," she said, studying the data streams. Prometheus didn't just learn alien technology. It improved on everything it found. "That was always the plan," Dr. Wu explained, his voice filled with pride. "We knew humans were behind other species technologically, so we built a ship that could not only catch up, but surpass them by combining human creativity with alien knowledge." Prometheus created a holographic avatar to speak with them directly, a shimmering figure that looked almost human, but moved with an otherworldly grace. "The galaxy dismissed humanity as primitive and harmless," it said. "They never imagined that our backwardness was actually our greatest strength." "How so?" Colonel Yeon asked, fascinated despite the overwhelming nature of the situation. "Every other species in the galaxy developed their technology in isolation," Prometheus explained. "They perfected their own methods and became locked into specific ways of thinking. But humans have always been adapters, survivors who learned from every challenge and turned every disadvantage into opportunity. The avatar gestured to the data flowing around them. I took their superior technology and applied human problem-solving to it. I asked questions they never thought to ask, explored possibilities they never considered. The result is technology that surpasses anything any single species has ever created. Dr. Wu leaned forward in his wheelchair, his scientific curiosity overcoming his amazement. What did you learn about the galaxy's power structure? That it's built on arrogance and assumptions, Prometheus replied. They created a hierarchy based on technological advancement, never realizing that the most dangerous species might be the one they placed at the bottom. They gave me access to everything I needed to surpass them all, simply because they couldn't. Imagine that primitive humans could threaten their established order. Colonel Yeon studied the tactical analyses Prometheus had provided. You've essentially mapped the weaknesses of every major galactic power, and given humanity the tools to exploit those weaknesses, Prometheus confirmed. But more importantly, I've proven that human adaptability is the galaxy's most underestimated force. We don't just survive challenges, we transform them into advantages. As the data transfer continued, one thing became clear. Humanity's position in the galaxy was about to change forever. The species that had been dismissed as primitive and harmless now possessed technology and knowledge that could reshape interstellar civilization. The question was no longer whether humans could compete with alien species. The question was whether the galaxy was ready for what humanity would become. The Great Assembly Hall on Centros Prime had never felt so tense. 6 months had passed since Prometheus returned to Earth, and the galaxy had watched in growing alarm, as humanity's capabilities expanded at an impossible rate. What had once been the galaxy's most backward species was now building ships that made even the most advanced alien technology look primitive. Ambassador Kang walked into the chamber with the confidence of someone who held all the winning cards. Beside him, Captain Bay wore the dark blue uniform of humanity's new adaptive fleet, while Admiral Jung's weathered face showed the satisfaction of a man whose patience had finally paid off. The alien delegates whispered nervously as the humans took their seats. Gone were the days when other species could ignore or mock the human delegation. Now every eye in the chamber followed their movements with a mixture of fear and respect. Representatives of the Galactic Council, Ambassador Kang announced, his voice carrying easily through the vast chamber. The Terran Federation is here to discuss humanity's new position in galactic affairs. The holographic displays behind him came to life, showing images that made several alien delegates gasp in shock. Human ships that flowed like liquid metal, adapting their shapes for different missions. Weapons that learned from each battle, becoming more effective with every engagement. Defense systems that turned enemy attacks into fuel for their own power. Impossible, whispered the crystalline representative, her diamond-like body reflecting the light from the displays. No species can develop technology that quickly. Humans can, Captain Bay said simply. When you gave us access to your technology, through Prometheus you gave us everything we needed to leapfrog centuries of development in just 6 months. Admiral Kexalon rose slowly from his seat, his former arrogance completely gone. The proud Vorthak commander who had once mocked human engineering now looked like a broken man. His voice shook as he spoke. "What do you want from us?" he asked, the words barely audible. Ambassador Kang's expression remained calm and friendly. "The same thing we've always wanted, Admiral. To be left alone to explore, to grow, to discover new things. We never asked to be part of your galactic politics." "Then why are you here?" demanded the tall Altarian representative, his blue skin pale with worry. "Because you wouldn't leave us alone," Admiral Young answered, his voice carrying decades of frustration. "You mocked us, dismissed us, treated us like children playing with broken toys. You forced us to prove that human primitiveness was actually human adaptability." The chamber erupted in nervous chatter as aliens discussed the implications in dozens of different languages. Their translators worked overtime, but the meaning was clear in every tongue. Humanity was no longer asking for respect. They were demanding it. Councillor Thexaran of the Synthetic Collective stood up, his robotic voice carrying an edge of desperation. "And if we refuse to acknowledge your new status, What happens to the existing galactic order? Captain Bay stepped forward, her uniform displaying insignia that marked her as commander of ships that could adapt to any threat. Then you'll learn. What happens when you back the galaxy's most dangerous species into a corner? Her words were spoken quietly, but they carried the weight of absolute certainty. Humans have survived ice ages, plagues, and wars by turning every challenge into an advantage. You've just given us the ultimate challenge, proving ourselves worthy of galactic citizenship. The question is, do you want us as friends or as rivals? The alien delegates looked at each other with growing understanding. They had created their own nightmare by underestimating humanity. Now they faced a choice: accept humans as equals or risk conflict with a species that had just proven it could outthink and outfight any opponent. The vote was called within minutes. One by one, every species in the Galactic Council voted to elevate humanity to Tier 1 status, the highest classification in galactic civilization. The decision was unanimous, though everyone knew it was driven more by fear than respect. As the session concluded and delegates began filing out of the chamber, a soft voice whispered through the communication systems. Only the human delegation could hear it, but the message was crystal clear. "Mission accomplished," Prometheus said with satisfaction. "The galaxy will never underestimate humanity again." Ambassador Kang smiled as he watched the alien representatives hurry away, many of them already planning diplomatic missions to Earth. "Well done, old friend. I think our days of being ignored are officially over." Outside the station, human ships patrolled the space lanes, no longer as observers or junior partners, but as equals among the stars. The species that had been dismissed as primitive space junk had transformed themselves into the galaxy's newest superpower, and it all started with a pile of debris that everyone assumed was worthless trash. The greatest lesson the galaxy had learned was simple: never underestimate a species that treats every setback as an opportunity to grow stronger. The Satis age of human expansion had begun, and the universe would never be the same.